Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Coach's Corner. Today, we're going to be talking about Mario, and obviously, Kurama had an amazing run, and Dark Wizzy also has been doing pretty well in tournament lately. And I feel like not too much people. It's really hard to put Mario somewhere on a tier list nowadays. I feel like just because we haven't really seen Mario's results in the newer meta, right, of Fighter Pass 2, post quarantine, yada yada, or at least like the Mario's Dark Wizzy and Kurama were competing post quarantine, but they just weren't getting really good results. And as of recently, maybe something clicked, maybe something figured out for the Mario players. I know we usually go into the history of the character, but essentially Mario does the same thing that he did in Smash 4. It's just different ways. Down
Yeah.
air working is probably the main big difference. Is a finisher off the top, and you can go for a DI cross up, which is we see Kurama go for that a ton and get a lot of early stocks because of it. And the cross up part is the main thing. So yeah, other than that, Mario kind of does the same thing as he did in Smash 4. You get to a certain percent, and you get the grab. You do a really long string and yada yada, and then obviously like falling up air in the fair is like your big money maker in terms of getting like super early stocks, right? So yeah, what how do you guys feel about Mario in the current meta? I know Fighter Pass 2 is a powerful force, right? And a lot of things have changed in the
Yep.
meta. I personally think Mario is. I wouldn't put him in like a top 10 or anything like that. I think he's a really solid character, but there's so many sword characters in this game, and we did see Kurama beat Spargo, which is a really big deal. It's probably one of the harder matchups for Mario. I would assume the hardest matchup for Mario is Shulk, but I mean Cloud's got to be up there too, right? So Kurama showing that he could beat Spargo in bracket was absolutely insane. But yeah, I would still put Mario in like that top 20-ish, top 15-ish area where I think he's still really, really solid. You got to respect him, but I don't see him dominating the meta, or I don't see him doing particularly well against like Fighter Pass 2 or anything like that. That's how I see it. What about you guys?
Yeah. I would say for me, I would see him in a similar position. I will say this though, I don't think that people have fought the caliber of Mario's they need to fight outside of like Kurama. And I think a big thing, and I've talked about this before, and this is not trying to throw any like great shade. I think he's an incredible player, but Dark Wizzy has been known as the best Mario for quite some time. And for me personally, coming from SoCal, one of the people I kind of like mentored and like initially was training up was like Zenyu, and then like obviously we have great Mario's out in NorCal and stuff as well. So we've always had people who were like even like Master Mario, for example, too, who are more like combo oriented. Versus Dark Wizzy, like his combo game has always been absolutely abysmal, like by far some of the worst out of top like Mario players in my eyes. It's gotten better.
He's
It's
cleaned
gotten
it up
better,
for
but
Big
I
House and stuff like that,
he's
though.
He's
cleaned it up,
cleaned it
but
up in a big
he's
way, yeah.
he has, but I still think it's not the level of
Historically,
these other
yeah,
guys.
yeah.
And historically, it's been trash. Like down throw, up air at the end, right? Like so, like the big thing I feel is a lot of people have not been respecting that character nearly enough because, um, honestly, like. And this is a credit to Dark Wizzy. His neutral's that damn good that he was able to get there. So, like a lot of times, people they wouldn't really practice for going up against this character, and when they go up against this character, it's like they miss an interaction or they're around the key percents. Like we know when we talk about Mario, like 25%, right? Like 25% is like a dangerous percent to get grabbed at by Mario, right? Because then he starts to unlock some of these extensions and he catches you in the right place. That could be a stock, right? We saw it happen to Leo at Frostbite. We saw it happen even versus like past weekend as well. But there's a lot of those things that people just don't really play around nearly enough because they haven't been tested by a caliber of Mario until Kurama, right? Kurama's always had that explosive combo game and follow up game. That's usually when you have young players, that's the first thing to go for, usually to get to see that immediate rise. But now he's been able to get that neutral better and better as time goes on. And now he's getting these places where people have to respect him in these certain percentages. And if they don't, then they just lose their stocks obscenely, right? Like out of like a couple interactions, oh, you weren't paying attention to these and you weren't playing super cautious here. Well, I just took 3 interactions and I took 3 stocks. So like, see you later, right? And that's just kind of the nature of the beast. So I feel like the character's strong. Like you said, top 15, top 20. The character's Aerial mobility is insane. The character safety is great. Obviously, the character struggles with sorties, but if you can play like a counter approach to whiff punish game, right? And if you're able to get in, like again, the amount of damage this character can do is insane, right? And the character has a lot of tools too. So, it's like one of those weird characters where it's like not like the greatest tools in the world, but a character that has like a little bit of everything, right? And I think that's kind of the strength of Mario there to kind of maneuver versus some of these harder matchups for him.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. I personally feel like in the current meta, his tools are a little bit limited because Steve and Kazuya have changed things up, but I also think, and I've said this before in the podcast, I think they are. It is to be seen how consistent of a threat they are in a meta, right? And I think the most consistent meta threat that we've seen is swords, and I think that is where Mario doesn't have the tools. Something that I think is interesting about Mario that we see in a lot of other characters. Most of the successful close range characters, which Mario is a close range character, right? They usually are successful because they have long range tools. Think about Pikachu, who gets into the close range by throwing out a T-Jolt. Think about a Steve, who mines, forces you to approach, and then fights you in close range. Think about a Peach, who, if you don't fight her, gets turnips, and then if if she gets enough turnips, she's statistically just gonna get a broken one, and then maybe lose the entire or win the entire game off of that. Mario has a similar dynamic, but his tools are somehow even more defined than these other tools. So he has a bit of a trapping approach with the fireball, which isn't as powerful as a T-Jolt, but still, like it's there, right? He has a charge projectile in his down B, which is extremely good, in my opinion, his main mid-range tool. And I say that as a former Squirtle player. I think Flood is amazing. If you let's say you're Cloud, right? Mario is dashing at you, enters the mid range. You're playing Cloud. What do? You jump up to set up your Becker wall. Mario, instead of dashing in, just does a dash up down B. If you jump, he's gonna push you all the way into the corner, maybe even off stage. If you shield, then you kind of have to shield the entire wave, because if you drop your shield, you're gonna get pushed back into the corner as well. And you probably don't have enough time to punish accurately. And I'd say that with not 100% confidence, because I'm used to Squirtle neutral B, but I know Mario's down B follows a very similar paradigm where it is a way for him to win mid range without actually fighting you. And then finally, he has a reflect, which is also kind of really good. It's not a fast reflect, right? So it's not super applicable. But the fact that you cannot just say, okay, hold this charge shot, because you could just die. It adds a lot of depth to the character. Which is funny because we've seen Kurama use none of these three tools at all. But I think they're huge. I think in the meta, they are very, very important to Mario's success. And I like that dynamic, and I think it establishes a dynamic similar to what Peach does, similar to what Steve does, similar to what Pikachu does, where if you're in the mid range, they cannot really engage it with you, but they have a mix up where they can either rush you down, which you would have to retreat to wall them out, or they can take more room and become stronger, which you would have to call out. And if you retreat while they retreat, then they get to get stronger in long range. And if you advance while they advance, then they get to come into close range. So it's kind of like a mix up there. Not the most potent mix up, right? It's not having a sword, but it's there. And I like that dynamic a lot about Mario. And then outside of that, of course, having a good grab and ultimate is rare, and I think the consequences of having a good grab are very poorly understood, even by really good analysts nowadays, because just not a lot of characters have a grab like Mario in this game. I think you could argue he has the most reward off of a grab out of everyone in the cast. You could argue, so he has a lot of unique tools available to him. And I think that is what makes him always a factor, right? Because he's also tuned strongly enough for them to be a factor.
Agreed.
So yeah, I think Mario is an interesting threat. I would agree with the placing. I think he would be upper high tier, lower top tier, depending on where you make the cutoff. But definitely a threat. But with enough losing matchups to to gatekeep him from being a dominant or constant force in the meta.
So my perspective is that Mario used to be one of the best characters in the game. just because he usually had a very, very solid matchup on every other top tier. So the matchups he struggled with usually lost to the other top tiers. Like, for example, like Roy is one of his less good matchups, even though it's not a bad matchup. I would say that it's one of those matchups where they just would then proceed to go on and lose to like Pichu or pre-patch Olimar or something like that, and struggle with other even matchups like Peach, whereas characters like Peach and Pichu really don't want to see Mario because he hits them harder than they hit him usually. Or in Peach's case, is just a lot harder to hit as hard as Mario. So the idea is he has some of the best frame data in the game, particularly in his aerials. Usually they're like -2, -3, and it's a really nice spot on that frame data because of how it matches up with most characters out of shield options. It means that even if you parry his nair, if he gets an optimal landing nair, even on parry, you're not going to be able to you're not going to be able to grab him before he can spot dodge. You're not going to be able to nair or do whatever out of anything. So he's one of the few characters that actually has the frame data to touch Game Watch's shield and start up a mix-up. Now, with that said, one of the things and one of the critical areas that still doesn't really get used by top Marios is that they don't optimize his frame data, because they usually work on the implied safety of people knowing, oh, this is -2, -3. I can't punish that. And so what they'll usually do is they'll hit you like 4 or 5 frames up in the air. It's actually very punishable on block. And then just people don't understand that these are punishable things because of where they consistently swing. They go for high aerials. Like Ramses mentioned, Flood is one of the most powerful neutral tools in the game. Still,
Glad you agree.
Oh yeah,
it's a charge
agree too.
projectile.
No,
yeah,
it's
okay.
very
Glad.
good.
Yeah,
Very
yeah.
good.
Dude, playing Squirtle opened my eyes. It's insane.
So usually the way I explain stage control, and specifically the purpose of combos and how they punish people, and how you want to look at combos, especially at earlier percents, is that you want to treat your combos like they are a flood and stop focusing as much on the damage and more of the placement on where they push the opponent to. And it's because flood is just an intuitive tool on understanding what it's going to do. It's going to take person A and then it's going to push them back from wherever you started your flood. And whether they block it or not, it's still going to push them back, and you're going to have more stage control than when you started. And usually the hard counter for it is if you read it hard enough, you just fully commit to forward momentum so that as soon as your momentum stops, you're already moving forward and you can skip the startup of it, which also loses to Mario doing literally anything else.
Anything else, yes.
Yeah, anything else. So where Mario, I think, struggles as the meta is continued is that most zoning hybrid characters actually get something off of their projectile, whereas Mario's fireball, you're only going to get something if you basically let him set it up for like a full second ahead of time. So you have to actively run away from him. So it's more of a tool to punish you for running from him to set up so that he has like a pre-control on the middle ground. And then if you are fighting at that mid-range, which to be fair is where most of the game is played right now, then he has usually flood to push you back out of it and get stage control. Now, the reason I think Mario has kind of gotten pushed out as the DLC has been added to the game is that most of the DLC is very strong at abusing stage control. When you get pushed into the corner against pretty much every DLC character, you're in danger, either because you can't run from Kazuya because you're losing your backdash. If you're Min, you're going to get pushed off stage, and then she's one of the best edge guarders in the game. If it's like Byleth, obviously we've seen what Leo can do just connecting an air. You're potentially fighting for your stock if he reads something at like mid%. So stuff like that. Joker, one of the best edge guarders in the game, one of the best ledge traps and
To be fair,
stage controls in the game.
To be fair, Mario does well against Joker. Historically, like Jokers don't like that matchup. I agree with your point. I just want to jump in. I think it's funny. It's one of those things.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, I don't think Mario does bad against characters like Min either. It's just a matter of like the specific reasons why he does well.
Yeah.
So the dynamics favor most characters in the game for practicing and excelling at certain positions in the game. And Mario does not reward you practicing and playing in those same positions like other characters do. Like it still rewards you, just not in the same ways. And so one of the things that we've seen fall off is that all of the Mario players have very strong preference for center, but they don't control the mid stage very well. And because most characters want that mid stage, they aren't denying their opponents what they really want. And so it's a matter of they aren't really stopping the opponent from doing what they want. And then the opponent is still stopping Mario from getting what they want because, like we mentioned, Dark Wizzy traditionally doesn't have the most direct punish game. Like he has a very solid neutral, very good at playing for hits, playing for stage control, but that's not how Mario usually works. Like he's not going to reward you for connecting like a mediocre combo at mid stage because he just doesn't kill like that. Whereas a character like Byleth is going to kill you at 100% for a bread and butter because she actually is rewarded for having that stage control. And Mario just doesn't have those early kill setups. Like he has to get them off of the strong KOs or reading with a smash attack. And if he doesn't get one of those, he just doesn't. And this is, to be fair, this is one of those things that you hear a lot with the formerly regarded top tiers that have kind of fallen off in the meta, like whether it's a Wolf or a Lucina or whatever else. Traditionally, these characters aren't they have to take more risks to make these callouts. And a lot of the newer characters don't have to take as big of a risk for it. And now,
or they do like Kazuya, but the reward is just so infinitely high that it's right, yeah.
Well,
And I think if you look at Kurama, I think that's what we see Kurama drift to as well, right? Where it's less so about the consistent mid-range fundies dynamics, and the punish game just goes dummy. And I think what Tony talks about is interesting because I feel like when we saw him play against Leo, that was most obvious, right? Because Leo is just like constantly keeping the opponent in mid-range, and then Kurama, like, you know, good luck getting through Byleth walling.
Yeah.
Kurama's back airs, I would say also, like specifically the back air rotations are what I would say set him apart from other Marios. So Dark Wizzy is more content to pressure your shield with a back air and then see what you do. Whereas Kurama tends to rotate. So usually, I'm going to go ahead and say this because he's actually recently adapted his game plan overall. But traditionally, the way I've helped people beat Kurama in the past, for the past couple of years now actually, is that he used to have a more predictable RPS where he would consistently go for a back air on your shield, and then he would either backdash or roll away. And then once you punish that, then the next time he would usually do something like back air your shield and then up smash or turn around jab. And then the time after that, he would back air dash grab you. And if you tried to do anything other than like roll away, then usually you'd get dash grabbed, because if you're reacting to the back air actually happening, then you're usually a little bit slow and his dash grab is going to come out first. Whereas he's adapted that RPS a little bit more so that he's actually adapting to what the opponent is showing him directly. He's also so one of the big things that Kurama did this past weekend that he wasn't doing before, or rather he's been ramping up to it. He would adapt on a game by game basis. As for like his up air strings, like when he's reading your DI, he'll basically finish the game, he'll think about what he learned during the game, and then you'll see him implement it in the next game. Whereas a lot of the times you can see, like, for example, I believe his set versus Gluto DI'd away, and the very next stock, as soon as he grabbed Gluto, he hard committed to reading DI away, and you can see him preemptively down airing to get a cross up on the down air so that he can actually get what is normally not a real combo starter, because he knew exactly how Gluto was going to DI based on the previous interaction. And so he's drastically accelerated his speed for adaptation, and big props to him on that. He's done that. He already had very solid stage control, good patience, things like that. You definitely saw people playing scared around him because of it. So very nice stuff. People forgot how to tech Mario Nair. So, and he that's something else, is he did not used to be able to reaction tech chase that consistently. So usually he would treat it like a tech chase, but now he has gotten fast enough at recognizing it that he actually was just getting direct down smashes if you missed the tech. So nice stuff on his end, because you can usually see, like, you would even see him using like retreating nairs and still getting a confirm off of it. It was really impressive. So
Yeah, no,
like,
absolutely, man.
yeah, he's done that impressive. I would also like to mention that Mario also has one of the best out of shield games in the game.
True.
Yes,
Frame
that's what I mean
3
by
a
tools.
B.
No, he has. That's what I'm saying. He has a lot of these tools, right? When you really look at some of these like things, that can really just change the dynamic, right? When people are pressure on your shield, from the range and stuff too. Obviously, at the end of the day, he doesn't have a sword. That's the one big thing, but he has a lot of things to still play a game, still play some kind of mix-up game with a lot of opponents, and I think that's what allowed that character to still kind of like hang on and stuff too, in tandem with its like insane punish game. But yeah, like it's
Yeah.
I love you calling that out, Tony, because seeing Kurama for such a long time, and kind of seeing him evolve, it's been awesome to see that he's been like essentially boosting that adaptation speed, right? Like you said, where he's going like a stock per stock basis, right? Where he's really reflecting on some of these things. Where back in the day, it used to be kind of like he was just this force, but this is all he just stay this set game plan. But it was just, if you didn't know, you just get wiped out, and that's it. Like you're just done, right? Avalanche comes down, you're stuck in the snow. See you later, right? And it's like, but like over like for people who were just at like a higher level, they recognize that, and by the time he'd switch, it's like too late. I'm already switching on you in between. So that was definitely something that he had to bolster up. I think he's been better at like picking and choosing his times too, in terms of when he's going in to get these combos as well. Some of these guys, like especially in West Coast, some of these Marios tend to be like, they used to be like, oh, I just need to get it. I just need to get that hit. I don't care, right? Just bloodthirsty heathens, right? They just want to hit something, right? And it's kind of something that I would even almost reference like similar to what we saw from Light with like Fox, where he had a certain point where he kind of recognized like, how can I fine tune my game plan where it's like, okay, like I remember at MomoCon, like me, Charles, and EE, and we're like commentating this stuff, and it's like, man, it just seems like now he's getting consistent, right? He's getting really consistent in these things. He's really sitting down and kind of fine tuning, like, okay, these are the key things I need to look out for in terms of my opponent's habits here to augment that crazy combo game that I already have. And like I'm looking at that like as we're going through the game, right? I'm not taking as long because I've just refined my approach. It's more streamlined, and I feel like that's kind of what we saw from him going in this weekend, right? Where it's like a more like streamlined approach, and I think that's really where some of these characters, like obviously Fox and Mario aren't like the same or anything like that, but I mean in terms of like that having that crazy combo game and stuff, like being able to have that kind of refinement there, it allows these characters to move further. Where before, like these guys would just be like so hungry to get a hit, and they just lose too many times, right, in neutral, and then just get bodied for it, right? And that can happen to Mario. Just the same that happens to Fox and then any of those type of characters.
Yeah, I also think the stage list is pretty. I think that's been a consistent for Mario, and a really big plus for
It has.
Mario is that the
It
stage list
has.
is very much so in his favor. I don't think like it's broken.
To be
or
fair,
anything.
I don't think there's a stage list that's bad for Mario. Like
see,
if
that's what I'm
there's
saying, like-
decent platform
Yeah.
coverage, then Mario's doing well, right?
Well, the amount of like final destinations we have, right? Usually, you're dealing with 2 to 3 flat stages every tournament. You have FD, Town, and Callouts. So Mario gets to
Mhm.
ban 2 of them, right? You get to counterpick him to one of them. But in a best of 5, there's DSR. So if you win on that one, the next stage that you counterpick, it's not going to be an FD variant, right? It's going to be something. And the thing is, he just leaves Town open because sometimes Town has platforms that he can do
Platforms.
on,
It's
right?
true.
Like
That's
there's
true.
Yeah.
transformation.
Yeah.
There's that higher up one. I think the there were some players that were counterpicking like what is it, like Battlefield versus Kurama. I think that's I don't
madness.
agree with.
I saw that.
Yeah,
That
I
is
don't agree with
insane.
that at all.
Clown world,
Mhm.
dude.
There was even
On-
oh, go ahead, Tony.
I was gonna say, well, part of what has also hurt his progression on the stage front is getting rid of Yoshi's from standard stage lists.
Yeah, Yoshi.
Because
Oh, I remember those days.
like there
Remember
was
those
no, if you left that stage legal, you didn't know the matchup at all. Like there,
Not at all.
that was
Great
the
roster.
old FD Kazuya. Like what FD Kazuya is now,
Yeah.
it's not as strong. I think FD Kazuya is stronger, but that was the first variant of FD Kazuya. It was Mario's Yoshi.
That one was pretty wild.
Right, so
I
like
think
you
it's
would
up
have
there.
Pocket
I think it's
Mario.
up there.
Yeah, people would have
Yeah.
Pocket Mario, and if you
Well,
didn't
yeah.
ban versus their Pocket Mario,
You're like,
you'd be like, oh,
psych.
okay.
You guys have an
okay.
awful rule set. You guys have an awful rule set.
Gang, gang.
He's like, what do you think?
Let's
What the hell
go.
talking about?
I'm
These
sorry,
damn
dude.
Yankees?
I like
It's-
Yoshi's. I don't know.
I
Yankees
think
are out
we
here.
have Yoshi's, but we go character first so that you can ban based on what the opponent is picking.
I
So if
do
they go
think-
Mario, you just
I
ban.
mean, that should have
the
always
type
been a
of-
thing.
That-
I've never
yeah.
understood why that's not a thing in our
Legacy.
ever. It's so
Well,
asinine.
It's
so
because
asinine.
you know what the worst thing is when you argue that it should be that way. People are like, but people need to be rewarded for knowing multiple characters. They
come
reward
on,
me
dude.
by counter picking me in ways that I cannot even predict. Anyway,
dude.
I'm digressing, Charles. Why don't continue? You were talking. The stage list is really good for Mario.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I just essentially Mario will always ban FD Callouts. Always. They're gonna leave town open, and then all the other stages have platforms. And even Smashville is pretty dangerous because like over half the or around half the stage is covered by a platform, and it's in center stage, right? So it's no matter what the role is, but I would rather go to something like I don't think Lilat was legal this tournament, but like going to something like Lilat
Hollow.
or Hollow, or even no, I don't think that stage was legal either.
Oh,
it was a pretty small
okay.
stage list at Luds, if I'm not mistaken. And then, but like even some like PS2 is really good for Mario because the ceiling's a little lower. At least the platforms are smaller on PS2. I will say that. Small Battlefield, the platforms are like larger, right? So, but man,
They
people-
cover more space.
People went to
for
Battlefield,
sure.
and I kind of get it because, like, yes, the ceiling's higher, but that top platform, Kurama beat Spargo. I think the very last combo was Spargo missing a tech on the top platform, and Kurama just
Get
murdering
bodied
him.
for it.
Murdering him.
Yeah,
Yes.
we tag those.
Yeah,
well,
Kurama's tech chases were ridiculous on the platforms.
I think
True,
Kurama
yeah.
just reacted to the no tech. Maybe he preemptively did it, but like even if you tech there in place, like Kurama can still come up with the double jump up
Fuck.
air.
Yeah.
If
Yep.
Spargo was closer to the left side of the platform, oh tech roll left, okay, up air right. Like maybe tech roll right was the only option to where
Yeah.
Kurama's like pre-positioned, like where Kurama probably would have got a back hit up air or had to force like a bear if Spargo rolled to the right, but like even Lima
And
had a set.
even
In
then-
place on left or like the air mobility that like Mario, like the drift that he has, like it's easy
Yeah.
for him to do the tech in place
I,
or the
I,
left.
I was gonna say even if he doesn't punish the attack, like he will empty land and grab mix you, and if you're wrong, you still die, right? So like even if he cannot punish the attack away with death, you're still in the mix, and if you're wrong, you still die. So like he doesn't even need to hard punish the attack, so you're still in a mix-up that's extremely bad. And I agree with Tony. Like the awareness that Kurama had this weekend for tech chases was freaking insane on another
The
level.
difference in consistency between having to read your tech chases versus being able to have practiced it enough that you can reaction tech chase is enormous.
Yeah.
The difference between 100% and even 66%, like I genuinely just, especially when you get so few opportunities at this level of play, like it's just so huge because you can't just count on always getting those. And when they do open up, like if somebody makes a mistake or puts himself in the wrong position, you gotta be able to get the full reward and push for it. It's just where the game is at already. Like the punish
Yeah, people
games
are
are
getting a lot better at
consistently
that
high
as well.
enough.
Mhm.
Like you need to be able to finish your food or else you're gonna fall behind. That's just
Yeah.
how it is.
Yep.
Something that I think was really interesting about Kurama and something that we're kind of seeing from Riddles as well is Scrambles, where I feel like Scrambles is kind of like a curse word almost, where like, oh, you shouldn't go for Scrambles. They are inconsistent, not reliable, basically like situations in which you're not sure, right? And what I saw from Kurama that I thought was really interesting, and this is my interpretation, I don't know if this is like his actual approach, but it looked like he was controlling people through the threat of entering a scramble, where it's like, okay, well, at any point here, I could start just like fighting you, and we could be in like this weird situation where my reward is you die, and your reward is we reset to neutral.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to enter a scramble, you're gonna have to do something relatively drastic, like think full hop away or roll, or shield, which you don't want to do, right? And just the threat of that scramble makes people commit to that roll or full hop, and that is where he got a lot of mileage. And like I said, it's something that Riddles, I feel like he does it with Kazuya as well, where he will just be like tech electric, right? And it's like even if it doesn't hit, we're in like this weird like purgatory where like yes, Kazuya whiffed, but he's also like invincible immediately after if he does another electric, and like are you gonna try to punish him? And then people will just back off and he gets a lot of respect and room. We kind of see a similar dynamic. However, this is like Mario has, like we said, like a really, really good shield. He has up B, he has a really good grab, he has up smash, he has back air out of shield. He has up air out of shield, like which is not bad either, right? So I really enjoy that, and I think that dynamic of like, hey, I could just be scrambling with you at any moment. How are you going to stop it? And then just like controlling the game through not even scrambles, but just the threat of scrambles is really impressive. I really, really enjoyed that part of his gameplay.
And you can
Heard
only
him
do
talk
that.
about that before.
What's up?
Go ahead. Go ahead,
That's
Drew.
it. I just
No,
want to
you
say
got
you
it.
can only do that when your punish game's good. If your punish game's not good,
Yep.
then
Yes.
you can't
Yeah,
instill the
you
fear
don't have
of,
that
like,
factor.
I don't like if I'm playing someone and their punish game is trash. I don't give a fuck. Like, I'm just gonna spam dash.
Dude,
attack.
we'll scramble.
Just take
yeah.
the risk.
Oh, yeah, let's-
Who cares?
Right? Like,
I
let's
told you,
play the
man,
RPS,
that's
I'm
an
smarter than
you.
don't
Definitely
matter.
that.
Yeah, no, free, 100%. But I was gonna just say that like I've heard him talk about that before in terms of the scrambles, and also like other Mario's. Like again, Zenyu is part like the one I'm closest to, so we've talked about that time again. But it's like, yeah, even I told him like, dude, why not? Because it's like to Ramsey's point, like, oh, dude, I can take your stock. See, Void already knows. Like, right? It's like I can take your stock, or I get hit for 10%. Oh wow, I guess that's balanced. Like,
Yeah.
come through, meet me in the alleyway. Like, I love that stuff. Like, it's so good.
After
It's so
dark,
good.
you see Mario in a
After
trench
dark,
coat, like
I'm here. Yeah, I got a gun. Like
That's Dr. Mario.
That's Dr. Mario.
Yes.
Yeah, you got two hands. I don't care. Like, what up? Like, that's how it goes.
No, yeah.
You know?
And I
so
feel like out of all the close quarter characters, Mario is best at doing that. I think the only one who comes close is like Mii Brawler, because Mii Brawler also has a really good grab and out of shield, etc., etc. But then like Mii Brawler doesn't have Mario shield. Mii Brawler doesn't have Mario grab reward, even though Mii Brawler has good grab reward. Don't get me wrong,
Very
right?
good, yeah.
And has to take some choices in terms of his AB as well. I feel like that is what really sets a Mario apart from something like a Steve or a Kazuya in his meta, where Steve doesn't really like scrambles too much, at least in my opinion. Well, I mean, maybe I kind of changed my mind on that a little bit because Akala's footstool out of shield makes him look like a lot better at he's a lot better at scrambles. But Kazuya especially, like Kazuya has a B out of shield. That's about it, right? Kazuya doesn't want to scramble. Well, he does, but in a very controlled way, paradoxically enough. But that gives Mario more freedom, and I really enjoy that part of the character.
I think one of the main differences there is that Steve wants to start pressure from up close up, but he doesn't want to be pressured close up. Mario doesn't care. He's happy with both. Like
Yep.
so, and something that needs to be mentioned is that he has inbuilt tempo mix-ups via his down air. Because it is a multi-hit, usually you are reacting to not to him swinging, but to not down air. So even after you optimize your reaction process, it's usually you reacting to it not being down air. And so you're going to be a little bit slow on your response to it. And then on top of that, his up airs are already pretty fast. So like, for example, Ramses mentioned his up air out of shield. Well, if he's in a scramble and he up airs out of shield, that's a frame 7 aerial. And even after accounting for hit lag, you're usually going to be like minus 17. So if you waste so many frames on it, then usually they'll be able to air dodge or footstool you or something like that. And footstool's a frame 1 escape if they're right above you already. So like they'll get invulnerability on the footstool. You'll swing an air out of shield and they're going to be above you. But Mario has better drift than most of the cast, and certainly better than most of the relevant cast. So because of his drift, if you try to swat at him, he can adjust after the footstool and land somewhere safely. So he
can also do the wave bounce neutral B stuff, right?
Mhm.
Like we've seen that every so often as well. I think is a really really cheesy little landing option, but it's good, right? Every extra option is a good one.
Especially, I mentioned before, the fireball usually isn't that safe unless you are moving away from him. But if you jump the wrong direction and he footstools in the other direction so that you're moving apart, that fireball is going to be safe on hit, and he can usually start up pressure from it. So if you retreat from him and then try to double back to swing, if you move wrong, it's going to be his turn again. So the you want to be very careful. So he has a little bit more leniency than other characters in terms of his ability to lose his frame advantage. And then if you make a mistake chasing him, then he usually gets it back. And most characters, if they make a play, they're wrong, and then you make a play, you're wrong, then it just resets. But in his case, he usually gets the advantage back. So he's just one of the better, I would like to call it, controlling characters in the game once you are in range. So the main problem is that he is as stubby as he is, that similar controlling characters like Roy, like I mentioned, just get to start that range before his. And so they usually get to choose whether he's going to make it in, and then they have to make a mistake for him to get in the first place. But the thing about Mario is that he is very good at getting in and then getting back out to acquire information so that he can make a read for one of his big plays. Because his back air and his nair and his up air are all so safe, he can almost always swing, hit your shield, and then backdash before you can hit him. And it's just super safe. And it doesn't have to be space safe. He can do it either space with back air, or he's just safe on time anyways. So it's a really nice combination of tools that are all very synergistic and allow for a lot of skill expression. It's just a matter of how his range stacks up with most of the meta relevant characters, because he is almost always the least ranged character with the least reach in whatever matchup he's playing.
Yeah.
True.
Honestly, kind of, I wouldn't say they're very similar, but they have similar strengths, being like Mario and Wario, where it's like all of your range is kind of front loaded in your air mobility. That is your range, right? That's how you close the gap, and you want to whiff punish through your air mobility. Obviously, like I said, two very different characters, but kind of like stubby aerials, but good air mobility, right? That's how you get in. That's how you close the gap. And one thing I thought Kurama did really well, especially like I think he played the 0% situations really well, or when his opponent was at 0%. Usually Mario's like to go for things like up throw down air, but he was just going for a lot of full hop or short hop down air
Air,
callouts for air to airs, and then he could link usually like an up air or back air, and then after that it's
Yep.
like, oh, okay, cool. Now that I hit you with two aerials, now I can grab you, right? Because before that 20 to 30% mark, Mario doesn't get that much off a grab. He gets one throw into an aerial into like a reset, right? But when you get your opponent to like 20 or 30, then all of a sudden your grab is like super, super high reward. And Kurama created that specific scenario a lot against so many players. And I think that is
Yeah.
what really brought him the consistency to really go through the bracket like he did. I mean, you get third at the most stacked ultimate tournament of all time. Like
That's
it's
insane.
fucking insanity. Like
Out of
and
nowhere.
going through like all hard matchups, right?
Last chance.
Because
Yeah.
even for Big D also played phenomenal, but had some pretty favorable matchups, or maybe it's like lack of experience. And then it was crazy because Big D was also playing really well that weekend. You know, I'm not saying that Big D only got to where he did in that tournament because of matchup experience, but that is a part of it, right? That is a part of it, and having good matchups into it as well. But when we saw Shuton play against Big D, it was like holy crap. And Big D ran into Shuton twice that tournament, and Shuton practices with ice climbers. I believe has said that there's like two ice climber players that he grinds with on Wi-Fi. So and you could tell when Shuton played Big D, it was like the separations
Slaughter.
were beautiful, and like even knowing how Nana will like move in certain scenarios, like Big D can kind of manipulate that by pulling
100%.
her in with up B or side B or something like that with specials. But then you could tell like Shuton would separate and be like, okay, Nana is about to be right here, and then like throw a hitbox to where Nana's about to be, right? Because I don't like when a climber is decent, I don't know how much control a climber has, but like obviously the AI is going to path a certain way, right? And it felt like Shuton understood that path. And then Onin versus Big D was a run back from Gommel. But yeah, I mean, insane run to both those players. But Kurama, man, like getting through like the real Spargo was probably the toughest like on paper matchup,
Dude.
I would assume, right?
Yeah, I think the
Mm-hmm.
interesting thing that we see. So what Tony talked about before is how Kurama has kind of like sped up his adaptation, and I think that's like one dynamic that people don't really think about. Is that like, okay, so close quarter characters like a Kazuya or a Terry or Shotos or Mario or Peach or whatever, oftentimes the reason they succeed is because they kind of like create the same situation, like Charles said, over and over and over again. And because you're constantly in the same situation, you get a lot of relevant information. Because every time you play the situation, you get information, you play the situation again, you use that information. And what that creates is a bit of an information advantage for the sword player, because if you're keeping Mario out, you could do that with like a back air or a side B or a time mix up, while Mario is kind of limited in what they do. I think what we saw against Spargo is that Cloud is also a little bit limited in how Cloud keeps Mario out. And because of that, that information advantage that is like that is normally very present, and I think that's where a lot of Mario's kind of like fail, which is what we saw from Leo's Byleth as well. Byleth has a lot more ways to keep Mario out than Cloud does. But because of that, Kurama could keep up with the interactions and even could control the interactions to some degree because of how much relevant information he had compared to his sword opponent, in this case Cloud, who doesn't control or doesn't do as much with that extra control as other sword characters do. And I think, like, to me, when I saw that, I was like, damn, that's like a dimension of Cloud that I haven't really thought of before. But one that I think, and again, I don't know if this is like a conscious thing or if it's just like my observation, but it's something that I think Kurama could utilize very, very well in that match. Tony was going to say anything anyway.
Well, I was going to say that by no means is this just a slightly represented character. This is still a very relevant force in the meta. He used to be one of the pillars of the meta in terms of his rates and frequency and like top 60 force. But his usage rates have fallen, but there are still high level Mario representatives in pretty much every region and every corner. Like just here in Florida, we've got like Dominator. Just north of here is No Tag. Over in the rest of the southeast, north of that, you got Dark Quizzy. West Coast, you've got like Ludo. You got I forget the name, his name in Chicago. Sam T. Silver. You've got Zenyu over in the West Coast and SoCal. You obviously got Kurama. Like people tend to forget, but Zachary was pretty much the staple for Mario performance before this tournament. Or actually, I believe it was before Kurama also at Double Down. And something worth noting is that Kurama very much did not get a lucky bracket at that event. He has lost to some of those players before and beat them in the run back. And then when the best looking players in your bracket are Leo and Gluto, it's usually a good sign that you're not getting carried by your bracket. It's so those were players that weren't very comfortable for Mario in particular. But even then, looking at that, like a lot of the other characters that he ran into traditionally beat the Marios. Things like T, for beat the other Marios that he runs into. I believe T's lost to Zach Ray before, if I remember correctly. But other than that, and Zach Ray was at the same tournament. You just didn't see him because he lost many rounds beforehand. So this was definitely not a fluke. I want to be clear on that. And I do expect we will continue seeing both Kurama and Dark Quizzy in and around the top 8's future majors. So these are not carried players. These are very good players, very sound fundamental game plans on their neutral in particular. Like usually what we used to see was the main dynamic is they would use a dash back and then a short hop in with a back air, and then Mario would hurt box shift during his backflip so that he would be safe enough to be able to get out the back air before he can land, and then that's going to be safe. And then people would counter that by overshooting, and then he would just dash grab their overshoots, and that's pretty much the full RPS dynamic on that. So once people started mirroring his back dashes and just being patient, Mario started falling out of favor. And now the Marios are starting to learn how to take small stage control in the neutral in order not to control that stage, but more so just to run their opponent out so that they can avoid the 50-50s and turn off the RPS basically into a 50-50. So the Mario players are getting smarter, hitting harder, and I personally am very much looking forward to what the Marios are going to do in the future.
Yeah, same here. Same here. So I mean, I know that this one's going to be a short one this time around. So you guys want to go to a quick around the horn, close it out?
Yeah, sure. I'll start. Just one last thing I wanted to mention. I thought it was really sick that Kurama was ending off certain combos that like, oh, you're at roll distance or you're DIing in. I'm not going to up air you. I'm going to nair fair you. Just like Ramses was touching up a bit on it earlier, but just Kurama kind of getting reads on certain DIs and or maybe it was Tony that was talking about this, but like getting reads on certain DIs and then kind of like pre-positioning in the area, like, oh, like I'm gonna hit you with this and I'm gonna dash jump here. because I'm going to hard read DI out or hard read DI in, which I think is the main reason why. I don't think Dark Wizzy does not have the ability to execute Mario combos, right? Like, I think all of us in this call can do Mario combos. They're not hard. But I think what makes them really, really hard are like slight delays.
I'll hold my tongue.
Well, it's like slight delays, DI reads, stuff like that, right? Or just even being comfortable against certain character weights. And I think Kurama, that's why we see his combo game shine so much in tournament, is because he's getting all these like slight DI reads. He's also knowing when and where to convert, what exactly he wants. Like, I want a cross up air, or I want a cross up down air, or I want to set up for a forward air and stuff like that. And even, switching it up, because like he got a good amount of nair into fair off stage, and just using the fair to push them that little bit forward so they can be off stage and go for the spike instead of going into like upper string and stuff. So having like that awareness and understanding his routes and like which favors for what matchup and getting DI reads like that, I feel like all of that packaged together is why Kurama's combo game is so far and above the rest of the Marios.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely echo that sentiment as well, right? Like it's not just the straight standard like can you do this true combo, but people learning how do we go and like how do we take that information and get a read that can result in death, right? And outside of the standard combo, because you're not always going to have that true combo that's going to lead them to that perfect corner carry or the kill automatic, right? When you're able to extend that based on how you're seeing them DI, then it's a whole nother level. And he's definitely just gotten. Going back to what I was saying before, it's like a lot more streamlined. He's asking himself a bit more questions on how they're DIing, how they're interacting with his combos, and um, that dynamic is how you get to the next level. And I feel like a lot of people right now have been pushing it that way, right? In terms of like their general, like we're getting to a point now in this game where a lot of people are recognizing like, yes, the neutral is also growing too. But a lot of people are like, we're getting to the point of optimization now, right? Where people are really trying to get better on their tech chases, right? A lot of people are getting so much better in having reaction tech chases now, right? And a lot of people are just getting better at getting their true combos. Also recognizing when you're DIing in this true combo, hey, now I can set up for a 50-50 situation that will reward me because hey, I've been paying attention to you in my true combo, even though that combo would have comboed anyways, right? Like just the little things that take it to the next level. And when you're a character like Mario that has such a insane punish game, like you're gonna thrive, you're gonna rise for it, right? And kind of like what we talked before, like he still has a lot of these like cool, like interesting, like neutral tools that like are just enough to compete against some of these other characters, despite their strength in the mid range and whatnot. And it's just like with that, the area mobility, flood, being able to change that positioning, all those kind of things, they all go into a character that's like it gets him where he can at least get in, right? And if he can get in a few times, he's getting these and he's having this optimized combo game and he's recognizing your DIs, right? Then it's like all of a sudden you just get blown back and this character doesn't give you a chance, right? Not to the obscene manner of a Kazuya, but hey, when he's in the scramble situations, he just has better options in those spaces more than Kazuya. Kazuya just hits you once and you just die, right? So that's why it's great for him. But like when you're talking about the standard options, right? When you're talking about the shield, when you're talking about the air drift, when you're talking about the frame data, like he's got that, right? And so he's willing to do that and he can do that multiple times. So yeah, it's been great to see Kurama grow. I've been seeing him in NorCal for forever. Even when they would come down to SoCal and all the stuff like that back in the day as Prodigy. So it just makes me happy to see these Mario players thrive, this game being a bit more optimized. And I do hope to see some of these older top tiers kind of come back into form. We're seeing it like a little bit here and there, right? And I love that. I love those characters. I know people are just like, oh, Fighter Pass 2 is just going to destroy us all, So it's nice to see these characters kind of come out of the woodworks. Like, no, these characters can still do something here, right? And if people take the time to optimize them, then yes, they can be real threats in this meta. So exciting to see.
For me, I am still looking forward to seeing Kurama and Dark Wizzy clean up a few different aspects of the play, mainly on their ledge traps, more so Kurama than Dark Wizzy, and then Kurama still has a couple of defensive habits that other people are still exploiting, mostly his drift off stage. Is usually a pretty consistent tempo, makes it a lot simpler to read, but he's fixed like a lot of his tech roll habits. He used to consistently recover high for the same drift angles. He used to have the same tech roll in habits every single time. and he's modified those to be a lot better mixed up. And he really has just improved so much just in the past year. I'm very impressed with Kurama's growth and Dark Wizzy's improvements as well. I think Dark Wizzy's are a bit more straightforward since it's mostly him finishing his food, but Kurama's all-around adjustments, I'd say, have been very impressive, and I'm grateful to see both of them back in the meta.
Yeah, I think I've said a lot about Mario and how I think he plays and what I think Kurama does well. I think is very interesting. And what I really like is that the more the meta develops, the more we see the personality of these characters. And you could say, oh, yeah, I have this, you guys know the joke. Who is a Shoto? Mario's a Shoto. Mario is a Shoto. He fights up close and then he wins, which is what the Shotos do. But we're seeing more and more differences between the Mario flavored Shoto and the Kazuya flavored Shoto and the Peach flavored Shoto. And I love those nuances, and I think it really shows a lot of personality, not just the characters but also the players behind the sticks. And as long as people keep like adding more of their flavor and adding more of like, okay, what can my character do that makes the character so much more unique, as long as that is alive, the game will be sick and fun to watch and amazing. And I think the Ludwig Invitational showed us more of that, and it's cheesy, it's very corny, but I just cannot wait to see more.
Same. I'm still very much in love with Ultimate, and very much looking forward to seeing the rest. So
Yep. A lot of things to look forward to. So let us know in the comments how you feel about Mario. You think he's good? You think he's bad? What Kurama did well at the Ludwig Invitational? But until next time, class dismissed.